Good evening, folks. Welcome to the stream. Hope everybody's well, and nice to be back after my self-imposed sabbatical. Uh, yeah, it's been it's a good job I hadn't planned to do anything over the last couple of weeks because, quite frankly, oh shit, yeah, one way or another, it was. Not so much the first week, but certainly the second week. So last week was probably one of the worst weeks I can remember. It started off just under 65-hour week. I'd had to do some extra hours on top of what I was going to do, and then suddenly my colleague fell ill, and I had to cover her Saturday. So I was supposed to have the weekend off. Then it gets to Sunday. It snowed hard in Cambridge. My wastewater pipe froze. Right? So no water going out of the building. A few hours later, water into the building froze. Comes Monday morning, I tried to get on my bike. Couldn't get the bike off the drive. Just too slippery. And then wouldn't start. So ended up having to walk into work every day throughout the week, and oh my god, what a fucking week. One way or another, literally, it was just. Put it this way: this was the cap to my fucking week last week. I walked out of into the garden, across the garden, to take some recycling to the bins. And felt something squishy under my foot and slippery. And then I looked down, lifted my foot, and a fucking great rat ran out. Oh wow, yeah, that was like wow, what a week. But yeah, apart from other things, yeah. So there's a whole bunch of shit I'm gonna have to deal with in the new year and all that stuff. But you know. I'm kind of in a bit of a better place now. So, you know, there's no need to worry or anything like that. Had my doctor not put me on some pills, I'd probably have had a harder time last week, put it that way. But it did mean I had to go about 2 weeks without a beer. I discovered the joys of alcohol-free beer. Not tonight, though. I do have proper beer for tonight. But yeah, I've got a little bit of a taste for the non-alcoholic stuff. It's quite nice when you sort of just want fancy feeling like you're having a beer, but without the kind of, shall we say, the extra effects. You know, sometimes that's the point of it. Yes, to a point that is, but I do enjoy sitting down and having a beer because I enjoy beer. The alcohol's the bonus. It looks like the comments are doing all sorts of weird stuff, but yes. That'd just be an absolute kind of kick in the teeth if all that goes completely tits up. But happy holidays to everyone here. Hello, Kieran. I'm not seeing you all in a while. No, I've been away for a little while, as I just explained. Isn't there a heating problem across the UK? We have to be careful about how much gas we use at the moment, and electricity, because of the prices, which are just ridiculous at the moment. But it's a European thing in general. We did have it was very, very cold last week. It was getting down to like -5, -6. At one point, it got to -7 in Cambridge. Yes, it was absolutely blisteringly cold. For some countries, that's not that bad. For us, particularly considering we can't just fire up the bloody heaters as much as we might have done. What an absolute shit it was. Yeah, horrible, horrible week one way or another. I had to walk 3 miles to work across snow-covered paths, and it was just lethal. How I did not break my neck, I've got no idea. There was somebody in the local newspaper slipped and broke her arm or something like that. So, great seeing you back, Glenn. Sorry to hear it's been a difficult time for you. Sure, I speak for you. Was sick. Great seeing you. Glad you're okay. You've been sorely missed. I've missed doing these things, but I needed the time. I needed the time just to kind of get my head together and sort it out. These, just a quick note, for whatever reason, the comments on the it's plain silly buggers, but let's see if I can. Probably not going to be able to do that. Yeah, comments are frozen. Great, isn't it? See if I turn that on, off. No. Isn't that typical? I was going to say, I'm flying over to Brent tomorrow. Probably be taking both a hoodie and a winter coat to be extra sure. It's not too bad at the moment. It's we are up in double figures for temperature at this point. Oh, there we go. It's just going to be a dick. The comments on here, so I'm going to have to look down at the other end. Okay, so apologies for that. Let's not mess with it. It is sort of working. It's just kind of being a bit shit. One good thing about Christmas is that you can have chocolate cake for breakfast and be drunk by 10 o'clock. I'm just chilling out for Christmas myself. Just going to relax. If I got clear skies of the evening, I'll be taking the telescope out. That's my mount at the back there, which I've been upgrading. So it's now got motors and stuff on it. It's kind of cool. Let's a quick look through there. Evening all, literally just tucking into my dinner, but I'm here and watching, says Spike. Oh, hello, Spike. I hope you're having something nice to eat. Well, seeing the comments shoot onto screen was quite something. Yeah, it's going to do that, I think, today, unfortunately. I'm not quite sure what's going on. There must be a lot of internet activity, and it's probably just playing up a little bit. But we shall see how it goes. Hopefully I won't have to do some on-the-fly repairs, but I think it's just going to be a little bit of a dick. It will just occasionally, I think, just scroll up really fast. Couple of things. I did finally get... I had this recommended to me, White Dog. Sam Fuller. Interesting film. It's a little... shall we say, on the nose with its symbology. It's barely even symbology, basically. Symbolism. But pretty decent film. Very powerful in many respects. I'm not massively sold on the package. Yeah, it's pretty much just the film on the disc, and it's got a booklet in there, but that's all right. I mean, I tend to be more interested in the film as a... just as for what it is, you know. But yeah, just to say, I did actually get to sit down and watch that, and yeah, pretty decent film. Basically, it's about this actress. She knocks over a dog. It's like a white German Shepherd, and she takes it to the vet, gets it healed, but she soon finds out that it has a mean streak against black people. And it's been trained basically to be an attack dog against black people. So she tries to get it rehabilitated with this dog trainer, animal trainer that is a black man. So there's this whole kind of thing of trying to train out the racism. That's the hook it's got. It's kind of, yeah, it's not a bad film. It's not a bad film. Apparently it was pretty much lauded on its release. Like I say, it's a little on the nose, but it is a good film. Definitely worth a watch. Never seen Sam Fuller movie. I think he did Run of the Arrow, one of the first movies to use full on blood squibs. Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that. Despite my best intentions, I had to endure Avatar 2, 3 hours, 7 minutes CGI, 5 minutes of that with actual actors. I can't imagine a film that I'm much less excited about than seeing Avatar 2 or 3 or 4 or however many that he has in the pipeline, but given how it's been received, as far as I can tell, it's not really going to... They'll probably never see the other ones. the Avatar 2, although it's not doing kind of like horribly in the box office, it's not nearly doing well enough, because James Cameron's not exactly known for being a budget filmmaker, is he? To say the least. Oh dear. I was not happy, Bunny. I'm so sorry you had to sit through it. In the age of Arrow DVDs, I feel cheated if DVDs don't have numerous special features. It's nice to have them, but I'm more interested in having a decent presentation, and this does have decent presentation. It's got the DVD and the Blu-ray, and the booklet's quite good. So I wouldn't say it was a rip-off. I mean, it wasn't a particularly expensive set to buy either, so it's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. Same John, what Eureka releases normally have special features. Yeah, I was a little surprised with that one, but like I say, not a big deal, to be absolutely honest. So, great trailer for a film called Megan. I haven't seen that. So, I did spend the last couple of weeks, my brother and I sat down and did a watch party thing on Amazon. So we watched a few films together, which was quite good. I did actually, the other day, not with my brother, but I watched Waco Rules of Engagement. If you haven't seen that, it's astonishingly powerful. It's a hell of a piece of documentary filmmaking. It looks at the Waco massacre, essentially, how the situation is sort of built up, and how the FBI and the ATF and the other actors in it behaved, and it's quite horrifying. It is. I mean, whatever you think of David Koresh and the Branch Davidian, the way they were treated was astonishing. It was quite something. Richard says, "Hi Glenn, glad you enjoyed White Dog. Not many people do. They say the film is racist, which misses the point." No, it's very anti-racist. That's exactly the point. But I mean, it's kind of one of the points of the movie is kind of that. Once that seed is set, that kind of, because the dog is trained to be racist, and that's kind of that whole thing of are children, are they born racist, or is this something that's indoctrinated into them as they grow up? I mean, there's arguments that whole kind of idea of sort of racism, the one of the base things of it is in group out group mentality. But we are, as humans, I think we are subject to a certain amount of that, but we're also kind of supposed to be above that to some degree, because we have reasoning skills and all that kind of stuff, and there's enough information in the world that we should be able to get past that kind of mentality to some extent. So that would be possibly the only sort of avenue that you could possibly kind of argue that the film's racist. But no, the film is clearly kind of trying to be anti-racist by quite considerably. But the whole crux of the movie is can you rehabilitate someone in, which is the dog is the avatar for that, if you like. Can you train that out of them? Can you teach them out of that habit? So it's kind of interesting. A bit like Monsters, but I don't think I've seen Monsters Ball. Avatar 2 can be disappointing after 13 years. After 13 years, I want to feel lucky to survive being witness to Avatar 2. Oh dear. Or just trained to go after a certain target. Can a dog be racist, or just trained to go after a certain target? I mean, the idea is that it's kind of trained to attack black skin, essentially. So, the racism in some respects is an ideological thing, and you could say, does a dog have an ideology? But you can make parallels between training, kind of trained behaviour and kind of, shall we say, in-group and out-group mentality, because those things can also sort of be built up through learned behaviours. But it's an interesting film. I highly recommend, if you get a chance, check it out. See what you think. Like I say, it had an interesting reception. I think people sort of saw it for what it was back in the day. Sounds like American History X with a dog, quite possibly. I swear I've heard of real stories of dogs being trained to specifically. Yeah, I mean it was a real thing. Yes, people would do that. But a dog literally being racist, now it's the people who train them are. You can say the same about kids. It's like I said, with humans it tends to be more of a potential. Well, in some respects it's an ideological thing. Can a dog have an ideology? But it's about behavioural kind of things. Probably minority on this one, but honestly enjoyed Terminator. Not a fan of Cameron's other films. I love the first Terminator. I'm less enamoured with the second one, but it's still a great film. And the other Terminator films can just, whistle. Early 2000s movie with Billy Bob Thornton and Halle Berry. Yeah, I know of the film, but I've not seen it. It's more, I think, with the film White Dog, it's more. It's interesting in in the way that it tackles certain aspects of the subject matter. I think that was quite interesting. I would say kids are too young to have an ideology. It may be controversial. Very young children aren't capable of that. No, like I say, it's learned behaviour, so that can be likened to the training of a dog. There is a certain parallels between raising kids and training a dog in some respects. You train a dog to kind of behave in certain ways, be it like toilet training, i.e. it doesn't shit in the house and stuff like that, to how it behaves around people and other dogs and all that kind of stuff. It is interesting. Bring back Lovely Neighbour. I'm not too. Some of those old sitcoms, In Sickness and Health and the likes, where they had characters that were, shall we say, by today's standards particularly, but even in the day, somewhat troublesome. A lot of the time they had kind of a point. You got like Alf Garnett and stuff like that. A character that like Alf Garnett is this sort of buffoonish sort of character. You weren't supposed to identify him, but some people did. Some people kind of looked at that kind of stuff and kind of more identified with that character than they did with that kind of looking at the character with a certain amount of horror at some of the stuff he did, because Alf Garnett tended to get his just desserts for his behaviour. I did meet Warren Mitchell some years ago when I was working, and he was a lovely guy. He's not at all the Alf Garnett kind of character. That's seemed very different to the person that I met. Have you seen the episode of South Park where the dog trainer rehabilitates Cartman? I think I might have. At some point. Learned behaviour. Yeah. I mean, we're all subject to learned behaviours. We learn that stuff as a kid. If you, be it regular behaviour, your religion, your worldview, how you relate to other kind of communities and all that kind of stuff is something that you pick up from your parents and from your immediate community. So yeah, Warren Mitchell, who played Alf Garnett, was actually Jewish. Yes. Brigsby and Rising Damp to a degree as well. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these characters, but it's hard to sort of appreciate probably from today's point of view, but what those characters were. Most of them were kind of written as points of ridicule. They weren't supposed to be kind of characters that the writers agreed with necessarily. Dogs don't get taught their racist doggy school. I barely touched upon TV shows since I didn't grow up in the 70s. It's interesting to look back at them. Actually, it's kind of interesting to look at some of the shows of today and kind of analyse them in that kind of context. What would be really interesting is looking at a current TV show and then revisiting it in 20 years' time, as a for instance, and see where it sort of sits from your opinion of it now to where it sits in the future. Speaking of sitcoms, totally off. Anyone seen Mythical Hal Honey? Yes, I have seen that. That was extraordinary. That was supposed to be a much more kind of literal version, I guess, of things like Alf Garnett and that kind of stuff. You've got the actual kind of Eva Braun and Hitler, and my God, I mean, who actually greenlit that? I don't think the phrase "too soon" could be applied as well to that series. I mean, yeah. If you haven't seen it, I think it's on YouTube somewhere. You can actually watch that. Heil, Honey, I'm Home, and it is. You look at it and you go, how did anybody think that was right? I think it's like the TV sitcom equivalent of The Day the Clown Cried. Oh dear. Didn't the Likely Lads have a few racist undertones in some episodes? A lot of, kind of, 60s and 70s series in particular, certainly had, racist, sexist sort of stuff, it was, it's not that they necessarily kind of thought that was right, it's more the way they addressed it, particularly, those kind of things that they'd say, do, were looked at very differently back in those days, and it's really kind of relatively recently that actually it's not really relatively recently. Even people were complaining about it to an extent back in the day, but yeah, a lot of it's really just kind of bad pitching of these kind of like the tone in which they approach these kind of things. Some things just don't date very well. Things like Benny Hill does, plenty of that. Certainly doesn't kind of stand up to scrutiny today. Standards are different, You can certainly look back at it and, a lot of it's still funny, but it carries a lot of baggage. I'll be honest, mock me if you want, but it usually bugs me when people bring up someone's ethnicity if they're Jewish, as if that makes them different. You can say that's about a lot of people, really, can't you? In some ways that it does, in other ways it's not. I mean, there are, dependent on which aspect that you're actually looking at. Some things make them unique, or at least stand out from the larger part of the population. But is that something you should freak out about? Is the question. Is it something that should be a point of derision? Speaking of Day the Clown Cried, it's due for release soon. Yes, because I don't know if it's release, but the thing is, it went to the Library of Congress, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that just because you'll be able to view it, that it'll get a release. There's always the chance that you could go to the Library of Congress and see it. It might do a small-scale tour in some way, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will get a release. though it would be fascinating to watch. I imagine it'll be probably quite disappointing to watch, but what's interesting really is with that movie is the reasons why it was kind of hidden away, even by the guy that made it, that he suddenly realised that he'd made this incredible mess, really, or at least kind of mispitched thing, and he was suitably concerned about that he felt the need to hide it away. Though, kudos for him to kind of like give a copy to the Library of Congress so it doesn't just disappear. Good news, Henry Cavill isn't coming back as Superman. See, I don't necessarily say that's a good thing. I don't think he was a bad Superman. I think the writing was bad, and that's always been the problem for me with DC is poor characterization, and that's channeled through the writing. It's not the actors. I think he makes visually, and his performance is pretty good as Superman. Just Ben Affleck makes an interesting Batman, but yeah, it's just the writing. It's always the writing that bothers me with those things, because my central concern is always the character, the characterization. That is the thing that makes or breaks a movie for me. It can be a very bad movie in production values and all that kind of stuff, but when it comes down to it, if the characterization is good and the story is decent, then I can enjoy the film, and that's where my sticking point with DC in its the DCEU has always been. It's not even the visual style, although I'm not particularly a fan of the visual style. I find it a bit dreary, to say the least. But yeah, I think all of the superhero films now have just... I think Marvel's more or less petered out an awful lot from their high. There may be a couple of them that I'll be interested in seeing, but I'm not super excited about it going ahead any more than I am DC particularly. So I says Benny Hill was bloody hilarious. I remember watching it as a kid. I think I'd find it a bit cringy these days though. It's not to kind of like come across as being overly right on or anything like that, but that humour is uncomfortably dated for me. DC's way too down and dark, whereas Marvel is the opposite, way too jovial and unwilling to take risks. Oh, they do take risks once in a while with Marvel. It's just they don't always follow through, and I think that's the thing with Marvel. The stakes aren't as solidly there as perhaps they should be, but they have done that, and as long as they don't just kind of bring Robert Downey Jr. back because they need the box office. Endgame has a couple of very powerful moments, as does Infinity Wars, and a few of the other films before. They've got some pretty solid, dramatic content. It's just they've tended to kind of erase it and sort of start again. I think the only one I'm really looking forward to seeing will be the next Guardians of the Galaxy. It'll be interesting to see what James Gunn does, because that will be his last one with Marvel, as far as I understand it. And then, because now he's taken on DC, it'll be interesting to see what he does with that going ahead. His version of Suicide Squad was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that, and it was pretty brutal at points as well. I see James Gunn, I think, is very, very good at writing characters. Very good at writing characters. And his grasp of pop culture in general, whether you think it's applied right in terms of the Marvel characters or not, his kind of grasp of pop culture seems to be pretty solid. And, I think his music choices are great. Appropriate, interesting. Doesn't clash with what's going on. But Affleck was the most comic accurate. So people say, yeah. Yeah. And I wish it had a better dialogue and stuff like that. I wish it had a better story within the DCEU. Keaton beats Affleck as best Batman. Yeah, no, I mean, it's Keaton's one was very much the kind. It's a real sort of bridge between the '60s and the '90s. Or at least the current iteration is right slap bang in the middle. Some that's perfect, but yeah. I think they've all got something to offer. It's just depending on what you're wanting to find, really. Batman Returns used to be one of my least favourite superhero movies. Now it ranks as possibly my favourite now. Oh, is that the second one? That's the second one, isn't it? Yeah. Interesting one. Dark. Too dark for the audiences, apparently. But it still has that comic book feel. And I'd never really felt that with the Snyderverse. I'd always felt with Snyder's handling of the characters that it felt like he just didn't like those characters. That's the kind of gist I got, that kind of stuff. House on Edge Park is getting an uncut 4K release from 88 in the new year. Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, there's a few things I'm after. I probably won't be getting that one because I've already got it in another form. There's a few Jess Franco ones which are out on like Severin and stuff like that. Funny enough, actually, because I've already started writing the next review, which will be Franco file of Shining Sex. I would like the Severin version of that because it's got some interesting extras. I was contemplating doing Night of the Eagles. Maybe I'll do that at another point, but yeah, Mark Hamill and Christopher Lee in a Jess Franco film. I have watched it. It's not a great Franco film, although I mean it looks good and all. It's 89, I think that was done. It's just a weird one. In that respect, it might. Well, it's Jess Franco. Of course, it's weird. It's just weirdly pitched in some respects. I like what Burton did with the films in terms of the set. Yeah, I mean he had a very unique kind of approach to that sort of stuff. It very, very Tim Burton, obviously. Really liked The Batman. Yes, I enjoyed that. I thought it was an interesting character study. And that's, again, its character. Is it? I like different takes on a character that really kind of explore them. Batman Returns is definitely worth a rewatch. Yeah, you know what? I think I'll try and check that out at some point soon. Franco, absolute toilet. Simon famously hates Jess Franco. Actually, I can understand it considering the exposure that Simon's had to it. I have a different approach to it, which is kind of why I get to enjoy it, and I guess Simon doesn't. Dear, oh dear. We were cheated of a Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman movie. Yeah, Batman Returns got a very bad reception. A lot of parents felt it was just too dark and stuff. They really didn't take to Burton's approach to the film and the story, which was, for a Batman film, there's quite adult moments within that. It wasn't as comic book as, I mean, most of the parents in their heads, they were thinking of the Adam West era, I tell you what, though, Simon, this film is actually kind of an interesting one. It was made back to back with another film, which I can't remember the title of, off the top of my head. But it was another Eurocine film, and it was a much more sort of light-hearted effort. This gets dark, despite Franco's, shall we say, attentive gaze. Is there a Franco film I really hate? I don't think there's a film I would say I absolutely hate. There are Franco films that I find very dull. Some of Franco's films that are so badly made because it was like a tertiary film. They were filming other films back to back, and they sort of cobbled together. Funny enough, though, one of the films, and I can't remember the title off the top of my head, was literally cobbled together with offcuts of various other films that were kind of, and then he just filmed a few shots to kind of fill them all in, and it actually turned out to be quite an interesting film. Jean Rollin. Yeah, he's another one that, I've never really explored his stuff very much. I've seen a couple of his films, but like Franco, he was one of those directors that did have an artistic bent, like Joe D'Amato as well. Was capable of making good films. But most of the films they're known for are basically Euro exploitation and sleaze films, or pornography in general. But some of them were really kind of interesting filmmakers in their own right when you look at the right stuff. With Franco, my interest is really built in his stuff because I've exposed myself to so much of his films. I can see the things that he does that you would not get from watching one or two of his films. Franco did introduce me to Lina Romay, so that's cool. And some interesting jazz. Yes, he was very, very heavily into his jazz. He did have a few albums that he did, music albums. But jazz was the heart of his musical mise-en-scene, shall we say. Oh, dear. Marginally better than Franco. I assume you mean Jean Rollin. Yeah, he made some very, very bad movies as well. It's one of those things. They were jobbing guys. They went out and just made films for a living. Sometimes that meant they were doing, shall we say, the lowest brow stuff that you can possibly imagine. But yeah, Rollin was a competent director, but his films were mostly terrible. Franco was just inept on every level. No, he wasn't inept on every level. I mean, you can, out of all of the films, yes, the really good ones were the kind of the smaller percentage, but when you make 250, 270 odd films, whatever it was he made, yeah, you're going to get a mixed bag, and a lot of it is going to be very throwaway. A lot of that was a product of, particularly with the Eurocine sort of scene, when he was making so many films, and basically they'd just go, oh, we've got this film shoot that somebody's dropped out of, can you jump in and do it? Or he would start a project and then leave it, what was it? Zombie Lake and Oasis of the Dead. Those Zombie Lake he wrote, or at least partially wrote, but he dropped out of that, and then he went on, while he was filming other stuff, made Oasis of the Zombies. Yeah. And neither film was good, but they were kind of very quick scripts. But yeah, that's just the nature of what they were doing. They were what I refer to as his meal ticket movies. That was to pay the bills and put the food on the table. But you see something like this one in particular, which is kind of interesting because it starts off like a bog standard Eurocine, and then gets very, very dark. And it is, there are scenes in that film which are quite hardcore. And I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating. But it's interesting how he handles the subject matter. As weird as it seems, he kind of he has his familiar sort of themes going on. Oasis of the Zombies, yes. Yes, it went out of my head for a while. I haven't watched it in God knows how long, that film. I'm going to have to watch it again at some point, I think. Yeah, they were just a gig to him, though. A lot of the actors got to work in his other films. Yeah, a lot of these European directors, they had like a troupe of actors that they would work with a lot. You watch any given Bruno Mattei film or kind of Joe D'Amato film, or you have Jess Franco film, or your Jean Rollin films, and you'll see the same actors popping up here, there, and everywhere. It's interesting to note as well, a lot of the Eurosleaze directors worked with some of the greats, at the beginning of their careers. Which is why they were capable of making a film on next to nothing, because they were decent enough at their craft that they could figure something out. I mean, to argue about the quality of some of the output at the end of the day. But you get a film like Bloody Moon, which is just a hell of a lot of fun despite being trash, and I think it was one that Jess Franco didn't particularly like. But you see those little twists of his genius within it as well, with some of the shots. Whenever he could do art, he would do art. The rest of the time, he would be just batting films out as fast as he could. Necromantic makes you wonder just what the hell is wrong with German people. Necromantic's got nothing on half the Japanese stuff. If you've ever seen Tumbling Doll of Flesh, then you start wondering. It's like Guinea Pig, but with porn. Also, the music in Necromantic is strangely beautiful. What is it with these exploitation films that have hauntingly lovely music? I would say that there is, with these films, whether it be something like Necromantic, which comes across when you describe it to someone as being a very perverse film, it is often the director is trying to do something, so they are taking care, despite the look of the film, the presentation, the subject matter. A lot of the time they are trying to make a film with some impact. One of the things I've always said about a lot of these exploitation films, when you look at the video nasties in particular, you do get a lot of films with social messaging in them. And it's not just reading in. Some of it's very clearly coded into the film. So that kind of attention to detail, where I guess one of the classic ones is Cannibal Holocaust, with that theme. A lot of people, especially at the time, one of the most notorious of the video nasties was Cannibal Holocaust, and to this day is often derided as being a particularly brutal and nasty film. Some people would call it worthless for some of the stuff that it does. But that's not what it was to the director. So yeah. Byron says Bloody Moon is more of an art film than Bicycle Thieves. Bicycle Thieves, I think, is an incredible film. If you haven't seen it, certainly take time out to watch it. Bit of Italian neo-realist cinema. The crux of the story is this post-war Italy. And the story is that if you wanted to have work in Italy, then you had to have a push bike, just so you can get around and do the things and all that kind of stuff, because you couldn't afford cars and all that kind of stuff. And this guy scrapes together absolutely everything he can, pretty much leaves his family in with next to nothing to get this push bike. It gets stolen. So the film follows his basically chase across the city, chase around the city to try and find his bike and get it back. And there's a point where the character takes a real fall. I mean, not in a physical sense, but in a moral sense. And that's what the film is about. It's a bloody good film. Cannibal Holocaust has got 4K release in UK via 88 Films. Yes, it's a slightly cut one, which a lot of people are pissed about, but as far as I can tell, it's just the Goat Monday scene. Some people are perfectly happy without that scene. I completely understand, but even so, it's still a good film without that scene. Cannibal Ferox's worst Holocaust at least had nice music. Cannibal Ferox is a real kind of boorish version, isn't it, of Cannibal Holocaust? And absolutely just tries to justify itself with the morality lesson towards the end. It's utter bullshit, really. It's pure sleaze, is Cannibal Ferox. But it's enjoyable enough. Pinku doesn't interest me that much. Same goes for Nazi exploitation and Eurospy. Nazi exploitation has got a couple of interesting examples, but for the most part, yeah, it's that phrase that I coined, the generic bastard, which is pretty much where Nazi exploitation for the most part exists. It's giving these characters. Well, say characters, they're not really characters, they're just meat puppets that do evil things, and you don't need to know much about them because you know as much as you need to know by the uniform that they wear. As much as I love neorealism and Bicycle Thieves, it's a tearjerker for me. It is. It's a very sad story. It's a very sad story. It's quite heartbreaking. It sounds like such a silly premise, but by the end, it's a tough film emotionally. By the end, Bicycle Thieves ripped the plot off the plot from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I think it was a little bit before then. But nice try, Simon. Hang on, if it's Nazi exploitation, is there a Gulag exploitation? If not, need to go on to that right away. Well, there are women in prison films, which, you could say, I mean, it's not a Gulag, but... Cannibal Ferox is the movie that made me go, this is what I imagine a video nasty would be in terms of gore when I read up about them in books as a child. Yeah, I mean, it really is it is kind of one of the poster children of the video nasties in terms of it does exactly what it says kind of thing. Yeah, it's not really got much of a message. There's something, I do remember watching the film with Lindsay's commentary, and he's trying to justify some of the things in it. You sort of go, you're really kind of stretching it a little bit there. Saw your review of Martyrs to be kind of like Threads, Bill, both very hard to watch. I always tell people to pick time to watch. Certain films you have to do that. Threads is a film that I always recommend that you have to be in a good place before you can watch it. If you're depressed or anything like that, or upset, or just down, don't watch that film. Don't watch Threads if you're in a bad place at all. It's just brutal, that film. It's emotionally brutal. And Martyrs too, yeah, I think a lot of the French New Extremity is kind of in that camp, because some of it's incredibly downbeat. And funny enough, you can watch something like Guinea Pig, those films. I don't know how many of you have seen anything other than one of the first two, or even both of the first two. Those two films are very different to the rest of the Guinea Pig films. Very, very different. The rest come off as kind of goofy. Those first two are pretty hard going. But even the first two don't really sort of drag you into a place like something like Threads does. And I think it's because the reality of Threads is very much more immediate. It's one of those things that you can really sort of identify with, whereas guinea pig is kind of more an exercise in having a strong stomach. Threads is more of having a strong constitution in its entirety. You have some emotional strength to sit through that film. The Snowman, yes, I've heard a lot of people really kind of struggled with that. Have you seen Where the Wind Blows? Just asking Kieran, but yes, I've seen it. I can't watch Threads the day after or any of the nuclear war films. It's just way too depressing. The day after, not so bad. Don't get me wrong, it's still pretty harrowing, but it's not Threads harrowing. And I think, because Simon, you're a similar age to me. We grew up at some of the worst point of the Cold War, when the world was really kind of like on a knife's edge. Some say we're in a similar position today. In some respects we are, but not like it was in the 80s. I mean, the world annihilation was just one mistake away. So it was quite incredible. Seeing Flowers of Flesh and Blood, yeah, that's the second one. Devil's Experiment was the first one. It's like Threads in the style of Snowman. The reason I think I say that The Day After is not such a harrowing film as Threads is, what I said in the review, that The Day After ends with a hug, and Threads ends up with the just immediately muted scream of a woman looking down at a mutilated, probably dead baby that she's just given birth to. That kind of sums up what the difference is. And Threads is relentlessly just horrific. Yeah. And I mean, when you look at some of the Mondo, some of the Mondo films that are out there, be it like something like The Killing of America, for instance, or indeed Waco, Rules of Engagement. Some of the places that those films go really do leave you in a very nihilistic place. The Waco film documentary, it's depressing because it's cataloguing a bunch of crimes by people who are supposed to protect you. And you can agree or disagree with certain aspects of it. A lot of it is very much a matter of record, what happened during Waco. And like I say, regardless of how you feel about the Branch Davidians and those people, there was women, children, and just blokes in this place. Whatever you think of those people and what their religion was, and the potential for violence that was levelled against them in terms of kind of allegations against them and that kind of stuff. When you look at what the law enforcement did, it's supposed to be the good guys, and it's horrifying. I mean, genuinely horrifying. What the authorities did in that sense. It's a hard watch. It is a hard watch. And again, another one knows that you should only really sort of watch if you're in a reasonable kind of place to cope with that kind of stuff. Made more so because, like Threads, it's about a real subject, although Threads is a drama. It was about a very real potential situation, whereas Waco is something, Rules of Engagement is about something that actually happened. Highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. I think it's an interesting piece of filmmaking. Threads is a true horror movie, by far the scariest movie I've ever seen. Yeah, I kind of recount the fact that, when I went to university, I saw this thing in the academic library, and I got it out and had every intention to watch it. So I had about a 2-week hire of rental of this thing, and it took me all the 2 weeks to pluck up the courage to sit and watch it. It was quite something. What is the worst film you've ever seen? Is it still Coldfish? There are a few films. Coldfish is right up there because certainly, it's probably one or two. I have come out of the cinema, angry at films in the past, and I think one of them was one of the DC films. I think Batman v Superman. I fucking despise that movie. I really do. I was angry by the time I went out. I did just kind of second that film finished, I just went, nah, fuck this shite, and just did not hang around for the mid-credit scenes and that kind of stuff. I can't think of which ones particularly, but yeah, I have, sat in the cinema trying to watch a film and got halfway through it and sort of went, do I really want to kind of sit through the rest of this? But they tend to sort of leave my head pretty much as soon as I've gone out, because I just go, no, that was a piece of shit. Threads a day after a war game. Yes, that's an interesting one. Docudrama, the war game, basically a proto Threads, if you like, by the BBC. Was banned by the BBC and did the circuit basically on private screenings. Peter Watkins, I want to say, directed it. Very, very shocking, especially, it was like late 60s, I want to say. Watch all those 4 apparel. I'm going to review all 4 on my YouTube channel, but got so depressed watching them, had to abandon the idea. Yeah, it's a tough one. Some of these films can be very, very difficult to review. The In Extremis stuff, for instance, is often very, very hard work, emotionally hard work, apart from anything else to actually sort of sit through. No, Coldfish is the British one that I'm talking about, not the Asian horror crime. Different one. Director's cut of Batman vs Superman is better. No. I'm not subjecting myself to that shite again. Angel's Melancholy is right up with the most hated. I've tried to watch it a couple of times, and I think I got about 20-30 minutes into it maximum. Nah, just wasn't my kind of film. It's funny though, you get those kind of films. All the times I've been asked to review August Underground films and that kind of stuff. And I just look at those films and I go, I can't review this. I literally can't review this. This is not a film that's aimed at someone like me. Mordom, I did a very informal review of Mordom. And that particular film was incomprehensible to me. Project X was, oh god, yes, that was fucking abysmal. That was the one I actually sort of walked out at the end of it, just like completely pissed off at it. It's Project X. I'm thinking it's the right one. It's the one where the lads basically do Project X, which is a big party, and they invite a bunch of people on the internet, and then the party just devolves into a full-scale riot, and at the end of them, they're sort of like end of it, they're kind of held up as being these heroes. It's sort of semi-based on a real event, and the characters in it are utterly detestable. I mean, fucking vile. And then they're sort of like, oh no, they're good lads, aren't they? They're good lads. They had a big party, and it's like, yeah, sure, stuff got wrecked, but it was a good crack. Fuck off. Do you think The Devils will ever be released in its director's cut? I think it's possible. I think it's possible. Apparently, I think the film with the Rape of Christ scene is actually being screened. So it still exists. You know, I think Mark Kermode had a hand in actually sort of digging it out at some point. Now, I don't know if they meant that scene would be kind of aired or screened as a standalone thing, or whether it be edited into the film and then the film be screened. But what I've heard is it's going to be doing the rounds in a limited kind of way. Fred Vogel is a real filmmaker. I think he's one of those directors that, again, you know, he's not the kind of person, not the kind of director that tells the sort of story that's for someone like me. He has a very specific audience. It's a very niche audience. I found August Underground stuff to be fetishistic. I don't mean that in a derogatory kind of way, but I think there is an aspect of that, and I don't share in that fetish. So it'd be like asking me to review gay porn. You know, I'd be kind of like, this isn't for me. How the fuck am I supposed to react to this? Penance is a real narrative film with themes and an arc and characters. I haven't heard that one, actually. Funny, speaking of devils, I was in a live stream earlier today to mention that Warner has 3 hardcore Catholic chairmen who are ardently against releasing it uncut. That's quite possible. There are some Catholic priests and the likes in America who would argue that against a ban. Okay. All right, Kerry. Mortem is just to stir people going crazy on camera to exorcise their demons. I didn't get that from it, but there you go. Vogel wasn't present for most of it. Well, it didn't feel very directed. But then again, you know, I mean, I've looked at films like kind of Murder Set Pieces and all those kind of things, and again, you know, a lot of those films are just not aimed at someone like me. And sometimes that's just the case, you know, the film's not directed towards you, and it is like the example I've just given, it's like getting porn that is not aimed at someone like you, of your tastes and that kind of stuff, and then it's asking you to sort of assess whether it's good porn. You know, you can't really, you're not in the place where you need to be to actually kind of appreciate it. Yeah, have a good Christmas, Kerry. Partly made penance to make up for Morden, which he wasn't happy with. Yeah, I thought Morden was insanely dull and very fetishistic, and I couldn't really get my head around it. It is what it is. Vogel's film career after August Underground looks a lot more interesting. Well, you know, I mean, if you can come up with some good examples, I'll happily give them a shot, give them their day in court. I disagree. Vogel's films are fetishistic. Maybe the second one. I found that's all I found with it. It's like films like Lucifer. Is it Lucifer? Lucifer Valentine, the vomit gore films. Again, you know, it's that category of film that has a sort of fetishism to them. And like I say, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not my thing. Funny enough, Vogel was the main guy behind the effects in Murder Set Pieces. I mean, Murder Set Pieces was a pretty risible film. I was actually very lucky that I picked up what I thought was the uncut version, but it was like the, I don't know, R-rated or NC-17 rated American version, and it was heavily cut. And I kind of quickly realised this just by watching the film. not having any other means of telling, you can just tell. And one of my subscribers sent me their unrated version. Check out a Final Interview. It's a crime film by Vogel with no gore until the end. It's mostly dialogue. Okay, I'll try and remember to look that one up. Have you been playing any Resident Evil or other PS games at all, Glenn? Going to be playing Resident Evil 2 Remake again in over Christmas. I haven't. I've been kind of like playing with a couple of PS1 and PS2 games. Not a lot recently, but I have to say the Resident Evil 2 Remake, a lot of people really, really like it. I wasn't massively into it. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's a bad game per se, but I don't know. There's just something about it just didn't quite resonate with me. Do you think that Straw Dogs 1971 would have been better without the rape scenes? I don't know. Why do people say it's a rape revenge film when it's not? Well, it's not. Yeah, you're quite right. It's not a rape revenge film. I think they're kind of integral to the film. But I mean, it is a central part of that character's experience within the film. I think it would have been the character would have been left with a lot less investment in her situation without that particular scene. So I think the film would have been watered down quite heavily. It is really a linchpin for that character. Is that moment? Lucifer Valentine and Bill Z are pornographers. Yeah. I don't necessarily put him in the category of being pornographer, but there you know, Franco was always kind of like referred to as a pornographer, and he was so much more than that. You know, that was only one aspect of what he did. But yeah, it's partly, you know, a blind spot in kind of my viewing experience is that end of the market. Because like I say, a lot of those films just aren't made for someone like me, so you know, a lot of the stuff I haven't really explored. Certainly the Lucifer Valentine stuff, I've only seen bits and pieces of them. Getting hold of those films is very, very expensive, as I remember rightly. I don't think it's easy to get hold of those films anymore. I think they were because no label was really going to pick them up, you know, so they're sort of independently distributed a lot of the time. So very limited kind of copies, and therefore very expensive. And I wasn't going to spend 50, 60 quid odd for a copy of the Slaughtered Vomit Dolls or whatever it was. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I shall try to make an effort to see some of Vogel's other movies. I can't remember if it was him that actually responded to one of my reviews. Interesting. Fair enough, Byron. Like I say, I mean, I'll see if I can make an effort to find some of his other films and give them a chance on your say so. Yeah. I try not to be close-minded about directors. I have to admit, you know, a lot of Vogel's stuff has gone by my attention just simply because it's not really, well, I mean, it's not that visible, if you know what I mean, generally speaking. It's not exactly mainstream. And and when I say mainstream, I mean mainstream by, my standards. It's kind of one of those sort of niche things that just sort of out the way a little bit. But yeah. What did the person who responded to your review say? I think off the top of my head it was the murder set pieces one, actually. And he said, thanks for the review. At least you got to see the uncut version, because I mentioned that there was, the cut version and the then getting the fuller version. Funny enough, when I've had responses to those, because I mean, some of the times I have kind of commented quite negatively about the films, right? So the review has been basically, this is a bad film because of X, Y, and Z. And you know me, I tend to try to explain why it is I find it's bad and explore that kind of thing. I don't tend to do just rant reviews for the most part. I think when I did the hate crime one, I got a response as well. And because I kind of like talked about the film, and because the director had sort of said that it was against these people that are bad people, we're supposed to see them as the bad people and all that kind of stuff. And I was kind of very much like I didn't see that in there, and it felt very voyeuristic in the kind of way that it's almost like it was getting off on the violence and the nastiness and the language and all that kind of stuff. And then I sort of, at the end of it, kind of like sort of caught myself when I was editing it. I finished the editing, and then I kind of did a coda to it. And I basically kind of went, look, I don't really want to kind of project my opinion of the film onto the director, because from what I'd read, the director had said other things about the film and the intent and that kind of stuff. So I sort of apologised to some extent with the tone of my review, that it kind of like might be pointing the finger at him and saying, well, Nazi, and I hope that he saw that as well as the review, because I stood by what I said in the review, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that it was clear that I wasn't detracting, making derogatory remarks about the director himself, because I knew very little about the person. I thought it was Tom's sister who commented on one. She was the one that actually took down my review of Human Centipede 2. And I kind of responded and saying, look, it's fair use. I'm trying to kind of like do a review. It's clear that I'm doing a review, a critical review at that. And that's covered by fair use. And she was like, no, you use too much. And we know she's bollocks, really. You can pretty much run the entire fucking film if you do it right. Though I wouldn't do that. You try not to. One of the cruxes of weighing up copyright versus fair use is that you don't take the heart of the movie. So don't show too much of the pivotal kind of moment of the film, that to a point that people would not want to watch the film. They don't need to watch the film. But you're doing a critical analysis review type thing, you're going to come across a certain amount of that. But that review didn't really have that much of the film in it. My reviews tend to be 15 to 20 minutes in general. So and a lot of that stills, not actual kind of motion shots. So I was kind of like, I was a bit pissed. And somebody stepped in and kind of like one of my viewers at that point, but she did not retract it, and that review never came back up again. Which is a shame, really, because I sort of pointed out that it was one of the very, very few reviews that are out that actually kind of defended the film to an extent. I've always thought the Human Centipede 2 was actually the best of the Human Centipede films. It was an interesting sort of meta commentary, but it's taken too long. It's basically that point just drawn out to a much too wider degree. But I did kind of like go. Actually, no, it's kind of interesting because it's sort of looking at this is what you thought you saw in the first film, kind of thing. Because the first film is by and large not that offensive, really. Not when you look at it shot for shot. Was this someone who worked for Tom Six? No, it was his actual sister, Ilona Six. Rewatched The Human Centipede last week. Unfortunately, it was a cut version. Yeah, I kind of imported the uncut version to review it. It was on the In Extremis playlist, and then, yeah. Yeah, Nika Masterakis. Yes, we all know about his interaction with me. Yeah. Twice he struck down videos. Bit of a bugger for that. I don't know if it was partly a language issue. Because sometimes there is that barrier of language. I don't know how good his English is. He certainly seems to be able to write well enough in English, but I don't know what he thought the intent of that review was, or whether he understood what it was. Don't know. He wasn't really up for a conversation. I only really got to interact with him in the slightest because basically somebody else sort of butted in. No, I say butted in, that sounds very rude. They commented on my response to it, and he responded to their comment, not to me directly, to that person's comment. So again, oh right, well, we got your attention, Mr. Masterakis. Actually did buy the Arrow DVD of Island of Death, didn't like it. Strange Masterakis seems friendly in the extras. He speaks fluent English, just so you know. Yeah, but I know he speaks English, but it sometimes it's as a non-native speaker you can understand the language a bit differently. So I don't know if he fully kind of got where I was coming from, if you know what I mean. But yeah. I mean, these things happen. The amount of times I've had videos taken down is unreal. I used to have all of the video nasties and all of the Section 3. And they've been picked off one by one. So I'm probably missing about 4 or 5 now from that series. I mean, I really should probably just redo them. I was looking at doing the Island of Death one again, but really taking the piss out of Masterakis. I don't know, just have like a kind of puppet theatre type thing. But then I sort of kind of like sat down and thought about it. It was like, oh Christ, that's going to be a lot of hard work. I don't know. I might get my friend John to help me out with the editing on something like that. That would be kind of fun, and absolutely just rip the fuck out of it. I'd have to be very, honest about the film, because I like the film. A lot of people don't like the film. I kind of find it. I find it an interesting film on several levels. But yeah, could you ever sit through Wrong Way again? Oh God, I mean, that is a broken film. That is a really broken film. It's one of those films you sit down and you watch and you go, am I watching the cut version? It pretty much devolves into porn on several times. I mean, that's essentially the point of the film. It's basically a kind of Last House on the Left type thing, but with grungy bikers and rather idiotic women. It's bizarre. It is bizarre. It's worth watch just for how strange that film is. I think you would describe it as, I mean, there's a category of porn which was called roughies, and I would probably kind of put it in that sort of end of the market. It's strange. It's a very, very strange staccato film, especially the end. From what I remember of the end, because I've watched it about 2 or 3 times, I think, to review it. Probably twice, actually, just twice. I barely remember much of it. I do remember they sort of go on they're doing this almost like Manos the Hands of Fate kind of journey, and they take a wrong turn, and then the car breaks down, and they're like kind of like, oh, we're gonna have to walk so far. Oh, it's so hot. Let's get changed. Oh, it really it's awful. Oh dear, oh dear. Lawrence Harvey, who was in Centipede 2 and 3, has made some real messed up films. He's actually quite a really nice, gentle, softly spoken person. He's actually a very good actor. That's pretty much what I understand there, Simon. Yeah. Back in the room, been pottering about, working tomorrow straight to my sister's after work. Love Island to death, and I fart in the general direction of Avatar 2. Spike, man after my heart. It is kind of fascinating now, isn't it? Some of these things like that was one of the joys, I think, about doing the Nastiest review and Section 3 was coming across various films like this one, the Grimm's Fairy. Oh no, that's not the right one. Basically, New Adventures of Snow White. I did come across that via the Section 3 thing, or it wasn't on there, but the New Adventures of Snow White, things like that, which are just little bizarre curiosities, that sort of pop up, and it is one of those films. That one in particular, New Adventures of Snow White, is one of those films I'm so glad I got to see, because it's kind of fun. I mean, it's bad, but it's fun. It's just something kind of oddly innocent about that movie, despite how bawdy it is. And I always maintain they got the Ugly Sisters probably closer to the original story than Disney ever did. Trauma or Serbian film, which is more exploitative? I actually stand up a certain amount for Serbian film. Not many people would. In fact, when it got released, I did an informal review for that one, a fairly brief review for that one, and I found that though there was stuff I didn't understand in it, I could feel it was trying to say something. It's just what it was trying to say was not something I was entirely able to articulate at the time. I'd probably be in a better situation to actually sort of at least say what it means to me, that film. But when it got released and I did that review of it, I was literally one of the very, very few people that actually kind of stood up for that film. Even as modest as my defense of it was, there were so many people just kind of like went, no, it's indefensible, and you had the cinema snobbing, a guy that has sat there and talked about Bruno Mattei films for many videos and some of the stuff that he watches is the cinema snob, and no end. All the reviewers were basically sat there going, it's indefensible because of that one moment particularly. And it is an uncomfortable film. It's a very uncomfortable film. I wasn't shocked by the film. And I think because of that, I was able to sort of process certain aspects of that film that many of us weren't able to. And that's not me blowing my own trumpet. It's just kind of how I am. I have an unusual ability to be able to detach myself from a lot of the more shocking aspects and watch the film and try to figure out what the story is. Though I wasn't entirely kind of like sold on all my ideas about what the film was about, I certainly felt that there was an earnestness to the film. In a much the same way, I think it was mostly because I'd been exploring that film Salo so much. And I think that's a very difficult film to process, and it's another film that a lot of people just look at and go, filth, get it out of there. Even like hardcore horror film fans struggle with that film, and it took me a lot of work to find that into that movie, to figure it out, figure out what it meant to me at the very least. Byron says, I am Catholic, but I do have a friend, who does porn. I think he's sick for drawing porn. He thinks I'm sick for watching a Serbian film. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think Eva's particularly bad. Serbian film is a strong film. For some people, porn is a problem. Personally, when it comes to pornography and stuff like that, as long as it's consenting adults and it's not, shall we say, encouraging illegal behaviour, then kind of like, why not? Why not? Found Serbian film too cartoony to be disturbing. There are aspects of it which are. I think the hardest part of it is when it comes to the younger performers within the film. There's aspects of that which are, understandably deeply uncomfortable. A lot of people will recoil from any depiction that kind of takes them to that sort of place. But the film doesn't show anything of it. And it sure as hell doesn't support it. I agree, Kieran. Yeah, that did make me laugh. That made me laugh out loud when I first saw it. Which is amazing to say with a film, which is as extreme as a Serbian film is. I think it might be worth, if I do another in extremis, revisiting that one and doing a much more kind of in-depth study of the film. I think that'd be worthwhile. I'm just going to grab another beer. There we go. I think I know which scene that you're talking about, which is the most disturbing scene ever. And I actually had to argue with people on that one, because they went, no, you see some of it. It's on the, it shot. You can see it on the screen that he's projecting. It's like, no, you can't. It cuts away before any of that, and you don't see anything that's on the screen when it comes to that actual event. I think one of the more disturbing bits is probably but there's a couple. There's a bit where he's kind of like, they basically put this sort of rocket fuel bloody drug into him and make him, shall we say, perform with the girl that's tied down to the bed, and then he gets the machete out. That's pretty tough. And then there's a scene at the end where the family are revealed. Again, another very, very disturbing thing. If you saw any of it, a Serbian film would be illegal everywhere. Absolutely. Absolutely would be. I I don't think the filmmaker would be, that ridiculous as to think that he could get away with that. Although, yeah, I mean, he did do this thing, and in an interview, he was like, "I don't think I was making such a shocking film." It's like, come on, Even though he drew a line at a certain point, there's no way he couldn't have known he was not making something as shocking as that. I mean, some of those scenes, I think Irreversible has scenes which are just as powerful as some of the stuff that's in a Serbian film. That's an incredible film. Again, it's another one of those films you don't really want to watch if you're in a bad place. But I look at that film, Irreversible, and I kind of go, it's a film that is centered in tragedy. Because of the way it's sort of presented. I mean, there's a reason why the last scene in it, as I remember, is the couple basically being very, very tender towards each other. And that's the last bit you see. You see this carnage sort of unfold, or refold, if you like, from the final event through to what was destroyed. Yeah, he's very good, isn't he? What I've seen of his work is very, very good. Irreversible, given motion sickness. Yeah, it's. Can you imagine watching it on a big screen? It would be. It's very woozy. It's very, very woozy, and there's a reason for that. That calms down as the film sort of goes on, because it's almost found footage type camera work. Remember seeing Irreversible on the big screen, unforgettable, since Gaspar was there himself. Oh wow, okay, that's kind of cool. Yeah, Irreversible is a very, very powerful film. Yeah, I'm glad I've seen it several times, in fact, because, particularly with doing the review, I did watch it before I even thought about reviewing it. That's one of the nice things with the In Extremis stuff, is I get to sort of go a little bit outside of my normal comfort zone. Not that I have, a particularly small comfort zone or at all. Reviewing the guinea pig films as part of In Extremis was an interesting experience, because I had seen the first two, and then the other four I probably would not have watched if I hadn't have done the review. Oh wow, that sounds like quite an evening. It sounds like quite an evening. If you haven't seen Irreversible, it's definitely worth a watch. But yeah. I just remember my friend sitting next to me who'd never seen it, flinched at several points during the violent parts. Yes, and it's brutal, that film. It does get very, very brutal. It's Gaspar's work is, it does have those, what I like to describe as very spiky violence. It is violence with real impact. It's actually 6, Byron. There's 4 other ones on top of the 2 that you probably know. You saw Mermaid, He Never Dies, and the first. I've got it here somewhere. Can I find it? That's the question. Guinea pig, where are you? It's up there somewhere. I can't find the damn thing at the moment. No, not likely to find it. It's around somewhere. Yeah, 6. There's 2 films on each DVD, I think it is. That's all right. You don't have to apologise. Mermaid's actually quite an interesting story. What is kind of interesting is the origins of those films, where they come from. The is it Hideshi Hino, I want to say, the manga artist who did the second one, and seen some of the work that he did in comic book form, and how that sort of influenced that film, really. I mean, the first one's almost like a special effects reel. It's kind of funky in that sort of respect. Second one's a more interesting story. Mermaid is an interesting story, and very much of Hideshi Hino's original work. You love Hideshi Hino's comics, yeah. No, I'm not that big on manga. I sort of got them on the strength of sort of having seen The Devil's Experiment. Not Devil's Experiment. Flowers of Flesh and Blood. And you can definitely see where that film came from. It's very, very, very much a story pretty much straight out of his books. And they are interesting. They're fascinating. It's just this... It's one interesting thing with the Japanese kind of culture, the horror culture. Just how interested they are in this whole sort of biology kind of thing, and corrupted biology. It's quite fascinating. You know, you've got like creatures being sort of like semi-aborted fetuses that have grown up in a sewer, stuff like that. You know, it's bizarre. Very, very dark. It's one of the fascinating things about Japanese culture is the sort of underlying violence. It's a sort of... Nowadays it's more kind of exercised through things like that, and some of the more extreme films. Irreversible is admittedly outside my comfort zone. Solo, I would give a go. Just don't eat. I mean, if you've got a particularly at all weak stomach, do not eat before watching Solo, because quite frankly, it goes places, shall we say? Oh dear. Yeah, sorry. It is doing this kind of weird thing where the comments are kind of paused, and then it suddenly just dumps them all. It'll be something to do with the OBS site. The themes are very post World War II Japan. Yeah. It's funny actually, because you can, you know, if you know anything about Unit 731 and all that kind of stuff, which would say, shall we say, a criminal division within the Japanese war machine. And Hideshi Hino's work is almost kind of like that sort of weird, perverse kind of fascination with vivisection and all sorts of stuff, really, and disease and corruption of the body. But yes, his outlet for it is a lot healthier than Unit 731 ever was. But that said, you know, as soon as the war was over, America recruited a whole bunch of the Unit 731 commanders and scientists rather than prosecute them, because they went, you know, these guys have got some interesting medical information. Literally Operation Paperclip, you know, where the Germans were kind of like imported into America, like the likes of Werner von Braun. Was a walk in the park compared to some of the Japanese war crimes criminals. All right, Adam, you have a good Christmas. The storylines feel very Brothers Grimm. Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Yeah, I can sort of see that. Recording my old Twitter review for Men Behind the Sun, had some guy post a thread response to it claiming that Unit 731 was a hoax. No, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't. The US government got a lot of information out of Unit 731. It was very much known. That kind of denial is right up there with Holocaust denial. It's like, what do you do with people like that? to be perfectly honest, you are probably right to ignore the person, because anyone who sort of believes that is not really likely to be convinced by any arguments that you put out there. But it was very, very real. There's photos and everything. They kept meticulous records of what they were doing. What are you going to do? Oh dear. I was kind of half tempted to put a film on tonight, but I tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to do a New Year's stream. So New Year's Eve, we'll do another stream for anybody who's kind of like sad, lonely, nothing else to do, whatever. We'll do a double bill or something. I was tempted to do Cannibal the Musical just because it's up on YouTube. Which, for those who don't know, is the creators of South Park made Cannibal the Musical in about 5 years before they started doing South Park. And it's kind of bizarre. It's like people denying Nanjing Massacre, which is ripe in parts of Japan. Yeah, there's a lot of denialism in Japan because, for one thing, who wants to be kind of like, of a country that's accused of that kind of stuff? Many of the people who were involved in it have absolutely admitted to it, but the Japanese government, for the longest time, absolutely would deny any of that stuff. Nanjing was very, very well recorded because there was Germans, British, French, American people on the ground. They knew what was going on. There's a famous incident with John Rabe, who's a card-carrying Nazi. Kind of had to be, because that's how you got on back in the day. So it wasn't a point of morality or agreement, but he was hailed as a hero because he took out a massive swastika flag and sheltered a bunch of Chinese workers from his factory underneath this thing because the Japanese were bombing. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. But in those times, you had basically Nazi Germany, Britain, and America, apart from other people, all kind of working together to try and save Chinese people from Japanese aggression. And Nanjing was astonishing. It was astonishing quite how bad it was. That was one of the more interesting reviews that I did, actually, because one of the things with the Devils is I actually kind of go into quite a lot of the history of the actual history of the film. So not everybody sort of understands that is actually a real event. I mean, it's kind of Ken Russellized, but based on Aldous Huxley's book, which is an account of the actual happenings of the Devils of Ludan. It's fascinating, and I kind of learnt a little bit about the history of what was going on at the time. So it was interesting. It was very, very interesting to sort of go into. I only go into it kind of like, it's not like in depth or anything, but it's interesting to know about, kind of some of the stuff that happened prior to the events of the film. Because one of those things is Grandier, the guy basically played by Oliver Reed, actually had a bit of a history with Cardinal Richelieu before the events of that film. They were quite antagonistic towards each other, so Richelieu basically, he was killing two birds with one stone, taking control of the city and basically getting rid of a critic of his. So it's kind of interesting to sort of see. Byron says, Ken Russell was a Catholic and put a lot of themes into the Devils identify with. Great film. Yeah, he was less of I think he was basically at a point where Catholicism for him was an idea that was falling apart, and that was kind of one of the things which really did go in there. So there's this heavily critical kind of aspect of it, of that's looking at the Catholic Church, and it really does vilify those characters. But it's kind of interesting when you see it, when you learn a little bit of the history behind, previous for what the film actually kind of shows. There's a bit more sort of going on. Seems to have become something of a theme with reviews. But I think it's kind of important when you're talking about historical films, films that purport to show historical events, that it's interesting to really kind of delve into some of the surrounding history. The only problem you have, really, apart from, kind of trying to filter through biases, is really kind of where do you start? Certainly when I was doing Men Behind the Sun and Nanjing Massacre, looking at the history of the conflict between, like, China and Japan, for instance, is a very, very long thing, and it's very complicated. You start going back, you go, right, okay, so why was Japan doing what it was doing? And then the Russians are involved, and the Americans are involved, and the Koreans are involved, and and all these alliances which are going on, and then sort of Japanese basically doing what was, kind of sometimes identified as being the first false flag event up in Manchuria, where they basically bombed a main railway line as a pretext for coming in to, restore stability type thing. It gets complicated as hell. It really gets complicated as hell. Russell was Catholic in his belief, but critical of the church. Yes, he was. I don't know if he was later in his life, but I know he kind of spoke about Catholicism, when he turned to Catholicism. It was like a friend of his was sort of discussing it with him, and he kind of went, "Oh, well, that sounds interesting, kind of fun," So he sort of fell into it, and he was very positive about it for a while, and then as the Devils sort of came along, there was a much more critical aspect of it. I can't remember if he was Catholic after that, well, identified as Catholic after that or not, but yeah. It'd be around New Year's Eve, waiting to put up my 2023 Al Cliver calendar. Fantastic, Spike. The only scary thing about that was the fact that one man could be destroyed just because they wanted control of Lou Dom. One of the things that, isn't really explained in the film is that Grandier was kind of unorthodox. It's sort of portrayed in the film a little bit with his, shall we say, more devil-may-care sexual conquests. He wasn't quite as sort of, shall we say, free willy as some would kind of say, but he was involved with women, which was very much against the Catholic Church at the time. He wrote a treatise about celibacy and why in the priesthood and why it was wrong. So he was very anti that. And another thing, he was described as being something of a secular priest, which essentially, as far as I can tell, basically meant that he didn't mind kind of like working with Protestants or Catholics. He saw himself more as a man of God. And he had the unorthodox kind of approach of saying that the priest shouldn't have to observe celibacy. And it got him into trouble, because the girl that you see early in the film is basically, her dad was like kind of like in the government, like Minister of War or something like that. Kind of working right alongside Cardinal Richelieu. So there was this preceding tension between these people before the witch trials, if you like, came up. So it's kind of interesting. But war in Europe also began with a false flag operation, Operation Himmler, where they dressed as Polish soldiers. I don't know anything about that, but I'd be interested in looking into that. Pretty sure Russell remained Catholic after he converted, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I honestly don't know. It's kind of interesting sometimes, though. The Catholic Church, when it comes to films like that, be it like The Exorcist or The Devils and stuff like that, often they actually sort of are a lot more supportive than you would imagine. It's almost like the Catholic Church has become, to some degree, they don't mind exploring certain aspects of their own kind of tenets, if you like. You know, when it came to like The Exorcist, there were so many people who were offended by it. Catholic Church was like, no, this is, an argument of good against evil. It's a there were probably undoubtedly some Catholics who were kind of like, no, this is evil, you can't show it. But there were plenty of Catholic voices, fairly senior Catholic voices, who were like, no, this film is kind of discussing the nature of good and evil, the battle between good and evil. Hello, Richard. How's our Xmas going, Glenn? Did you end up moving? No, I didn't. I kind of looked at the job. They offered the job to me. This was up in Nottingham, right? So I went for the interview. Literally 20 minutes later, after I left the interview, they kind of went, "Do you want the job?" And I said, "I just got to think about it over the weekend." And I didn't take it simply because, I sort of flippantly kind of describe it as, I ain't 30 no more. And doing the kind of work that would be involved with that job would probably not be good for me. Long hours, unsociable hours, weekends, everything. And incredibly heavily physical. And I don't think I'm quite in that place anymore. I'm 50 now, so you sort of go, yeah. So I kind of looked at it and went, no, I've got to sort of be realistic about it. And part of me kind of regrets it, and another part of me is like, kind of probably made the right decision. However, I am sort of thinking about retraining, because there's a job that I could do, which I think I'd quite enjoy, actually. Which should still be physical to a certain extent, but not in the same kind of way. Not that I wouldn't be lifting like 80 kilo fucking flight cases and shit like that. But seriously, yeah, I'm kind of thinking about retraining, because I think I've got to a point I could either find a technical manager job in a place where I'd be sat at a desk, or I can find something else. But I don't think I'm not crew anymore. It's been too long since I've done it, so I'm not in as good shape as I used to be. And B, I think it would be physically very bad for me. French Catholic tolerant of Protestants. Wow. There were some of those. The thing is interesting about that film is, back to the Devils again, that time was a very, very fractious time. So there was Catholics and, the Catholic and Protestants. Basically, Catholic Church had split quite badly. And I think it was about, it was like the next century on from after Henry VIII. So England had basically split with the Catholic Church. And in France, they were facing similar strains. So Cardinal Richelieu, the cardinals would stay very, very close to the monarchs to try to keep them in check to somewhat, to advise them and all that kind of stuff. But there was a massive split with Catholics and Protestants basically having at it with each other. And there was some people like Grandier who would try to sort of bridge the divide, because he didn't agree with all the papal ideas, but he still considered himself a man of God and a Catholic at that. So yeah. It's a rough summer here in Spain, 20 degrees and sunny most days. Actually, it has calmed down here in Britain. I've heard there's supposed to be another cold snap coming up at some point, but it looks like it's a way off. It's actually quite comfortable now. It's a bit wet, but it's comfortable. I'm hoping to get that damn thing out at some point soon, because I've had very few opportunities to do it. What with work and a distinct lack of clear skies, but we're getting to the point of the year where we'll get a few more clear skies sort of coming in over the next few weeks. So I need to take that thing out, and I need to spend a few good hours figuring it all out. I've now got the GPS unit for it. There is a kit that you can get for that thing, which is by Celestron, and it's a camera and a little Ethernet sort of splitter and a few bits and pieces that you attach it to your telescope, and the camera will kind of align everything for you. It does it all automatically, which sounds frigging amazing. But that's my nerdy shit. It's been fun, I mean, I finally I've done what's called a collimation of this thing, which is my old Astromaster 130. It's a shit name, Astromaster. So it sounds a bit too close to Assmaster, but yeah. Let's see if I can, yeah. So there's that thing, and I've got my other scope as well, which is this thing. Although I'm a little pissed off actually, because I've discovered that there's dust between the two lenses at the front, which means I've got to send it off, because you can't just take these things apart. But it's a nice scope. They're kind of fun. Always makes me laugh how religions claim to represent a loving God, yet spend centuries torturing and killing each other. Yeah. We're getting back to in groups and out groups, aren't we, really? It's kind of interesting when you sort of get into the history of it all. Didn't the Spanish burn 30,000 Protestants at the stake in the 16th century? I don't know the particular incident, but it's probably right. Yeah, I mean, the Catholic Church was responsible for some pretty fucked up shit. When you see the sort of stuff that happens in the Devils, the torture and the threatening and all that kind of stuff, that is, that is actual history. One of the things that people don't appreciate quite as much as maybe they should is the fact that churches in various forms have always been incredibly political. When you look at someone, like families like the Medici family who are Catholic, they had 2 or 3 popes within their family. The rest were kind of like, very powerful people in one facility or another, incredibly influential family, but they basically were very much like that with the church. They made a lot of things happen. There's a lot of hypocrisy. It's not isolated to religion. Religion just has a tendency to kind of pull a lot of people towards a common hypocrisy on occasions. Had a lot of controversy in Canada recently over the residential schools. Oh, that was with the natives, wasn't it? Native kind of what trying to think of the proper term, what we're called today, but Indians essentially. Yes, I heard about that. That's quite something. We've had similar kind of things happen with various, shall we say, schools and stuff even in this country. Surprised how Catholic Spain still is. I think you need a bit of terror to keep you alive. It's always been very Catholic, though, hasn't it? The only reason Britain isn't is because of, Henry VIII, really. He kind of pretty much whipped them all into shape. Obviously, we still have Catholics, and of course, there's still the Catholic contingent in Ireland and in Scotland, particularly. But yeah, those divisions never really quite healed, which is a shame. A lot of indigenous children, I think that's the most peaceful. That's probably a right term. Were taken away from their families to be raised in Catholic boarding schools instead and not allowed to speak. Yes, it was basically, shall we say, a cultural genocide, wasn't it? Trying to eradicate the original cultures. Half Irish, half British. I was born in Ireland. Dad's side is Anglican, my mum's side is Catholic. Don't have any little reenactments, do you? Kind of past troubles. It's a funny thing, One of the things with the Devil's Review, and actually part of the reason I put it off for a while, was because I really wanted to sort of it got exacerbated. The weight got exacerbated by various other things in my life, but part of the reason I kind of I'd more or less finished it. I'd recorded it, written it, recorded it, and it was literally about the last 5-10 minutes of editing to do, and I'd written a bit at the end as a kind of closing bit at the end, which is sort of essentially about lessons that can be learnt from films like this, like The Devils. And I use America as an example, and I wanted to sort of sit back and consider, did I want to say this? Because undoubtedly it's going to piss somebody off, but because I use images of things like January 6th and the Trump campaign, because there's a lot of religious sort of baggage which got thrown in there, and a lot of kind of religious thinking when it comes to things like Q and that kind of stuff, which, it's not an official religion or anything, but it's certainly grounded in like fundamental Christianity, and that was leveraged quite heavily, and things like Trump being compared to some sort of second coming and things like that, which I don't take lightly when I put into reviews. I really don't, because I can understand that to some it would be off-putting, sometimes distressing, sometimes aggravating. And I kind of looked back on it like yesterday, and I kind of went, no, I think I hit the right tone. I think if anybody gets offended by that, then they're probably very easily offended, and I ain't going to tiptoe around it too badly. But yeah. One aspect of genocide doesn't involve murder, but the displacing of children to raise them in a different way, isn't it? That's a kind of cultural genocide. It's kind of like what they're trying to do, or what Russia's trying to do in Ukraine at the moment. When they moved a bunch of children from the southern regions in particular, and from the eastern regions as well, and they took the children and they moved them to Russia. they're giving them to teachers who are teaching them the Russian way. They're not supposed to speak Ukrainian either, and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of thing that is described as a cultural genocide. It's actually a war crime, amongst other things. But yeah, UK did the same, reduced its military power and focused more on finance and banking. Yes, we did. Just saw it this year's Men on Prime. Interesting visually. I don't know that. Devils is fantastic. Yes, it is. Saw a podcast of a woman sobbing her eyes out, claiming Trump was a literal messiah. Just had to laugh at it. Yeah, it's quite frightening actually. When you look at America, particularly, there are people who are, in government who are calling for essentially a theocratic government. Which seems so at odds as compared to the America of most of my life. This past 10 years or so, it's been getting further and further over. It's kind of weird and scary. But yeah. But anyway, I think we'll call it a day there. Been a couple of hours of me rabbiting on. I was planning to potentially watch them. I was suggested Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, but we didn't get around to that. But we will do a New Year's Eve stream. Never know. I might do another stream sort of randomly at some point in between then, because I'm kind of up for it, and I'll have a bit of time over the holidays. So if you guys want to do it, then we'll plan a date, and you guys can suggest some films, or I can just grab something, and we'll see where we go. But we'll do a double stream for double bill on New Year's Eve. Have a few beers, see the new year in, kick this shitty fucking year out, and go hopefully with at least a little bit of a laugh and a little bit of enjoyment into what's undoubtedly going to be another shitty year. I'm way past being overly positive about the fact that it's New Year's going to be a great year. This year's got to be a great year. It's like, I don't know, it's going to be just as shit. Especially now, at the moment. But we will get through it. It's one of those things. You can't let this shit get you down too bad. We can only do what we can to make our way through life and try to have a smile on our face while we're at it. But if I don't see you before, I'll see you, hopefully, those who can make it. Those of you who, like me, don't have much of another life. And we'll have a bit of fun on New Year's Eve, and we'll make it a mega stream. And so we'll do 2 movies and a bunch of chat and shit like that, and we'll have a good time. So until then, have a lovely, lovely Christmas. I will be dropping the Devil's Review probably on Christmas Day as a little bit of a present to you folks. Thank you for your patience over the last few weeks. It has been wonderful, some of the support that has been thrown in my direction, considering how things have been. It's been difficult, which is why I'm looking forward to the New Year's stream, because we can just write this fucking year off and hope, probably without any reason, hope for a really good time going ahead. And I'm going to try and get that bastard out and actually figure it all out. But until then, I say good night. Thank you for joining, and enjoy your turkey, you beautiful, beautiful bastards. Night night.